Hey friends, my name is Cory. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm here initiating a network of house-based communities of neighborhood-based churches that are in network with each other and living on mission in their neighborhoods. And it's a joy to be able to share with you today from the Gospel of Matthew, from some stories of Jesus. I think in today's passage, starting in Matthew 21, is a lot of questions about authority and power and the way that we hold authority and power. Matthew 21 opens up with Jesus entering the city like a king. He's on the back of a donkey and people are laying their clothes on the ground to honor his entrance. And the feel in this chunk of this section of Matthew is that the crowds are just enamored with Jesus, and he's gaining a lot of influence among the people. And this is making the people of influence currently, the chief priests and the leaders of the day, it's making them nervous. There's somebody else who seems to have this authority among the people who's not them, and they can't figure out where they stand in the mix of this, whether or not they're losing authority or whether this new authority is going to have their interests in mind. And this creates a lot of tension. It creates a lot of chaos. And when they get their chance in Matthew 21, you can see here, starting in verse 23, that when Jesus enters the temple, the chief priests and the elders, so the authorities in the temple, they come up to Jesus and they ask him, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? And Jesus, he doesn't answer their question, but he attempts to maybe dig into why they're asking this question. Jesus answered them and said, I also will ask you one question. If you tell me the answer to this question, then I will tell you by what authority I'm doing all of these things. He says, the baptism of John, where did it come from? From heaven or from man? And when they discussed it among themselves, saying, if we say it's from heaven, he will say to us, well, why then did you not believe in him? But if we say it's from man, we're afraid of the crowds, for they all hold that John was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Jesus catches them in their motive. He catches them being afraid of the crowds, being afraid of the faces, being afraid of them losing their authority by saying the wrong things, to the point that they're more willing to be silent. They're more willing to be quiet. Jesus, in these passages and the passages ahead, we'll see him kind of put on display authority again and again and again. And each time he kind of drives in some of these moments, right? We see sometimes what appears to be like a power-driven authority, like when Jesus cleanses the temple, right? He's turning tables and Jesus appears like this really powerful leader. This powerful leader who's in control and holds power over the people and has some sort of authority to walk into a marketplace in the temple and just be flipping tables. And you could read that and go, man, like Jesus was this powerful person who just did whatever he wanted, right? Who carried his power to whatever his passions may lead him. When you dig a little bit deeper, the idea here is that actually the temple was oppressing people. The temple was taking advantage of people. And actually what Jesus was doing was disassociating himself with the kind of power that is built in the backs of other people. See, the question of where does your authority come from? And by what authority does he do these things? For Jesus, I think is the wrong question to be asking. See, when we're looking at the authority of Jesus, we're thinking about, like, what does authority look like in this new kingdom, and the reality where Jesus is king. So the reality where the triumphant king rolls into the city, and if he's the king, then what do authority structures look like? Where for Jesus, the way we kind of test and the way we look at authority is by fruit. There's some odd parables in here that are really difficult to navigate outside of maybe some of this context, but Jesus curses the fig tree. Why? Because it's not bearing fruit. But in the context of the conversation around authority, this is a really important idea, that if you're acting in the authority of Jesus, then there's fruit. But the question needs to be asked, like, what kind of fruit? Like, what kind of fruit did Jesus' authority produce? See, for Jesus, we can constantly look at who's benefiting from his authority. See, when Jesus exercises the authority that he has, it's not him who benefits from it. It's not the people who already have power, the people who are oppressors, the people who are wealthy and are rich or have all of this stuff. They're not the ones either who benefit from Jesus exercising his authority. But when Jesus exercises his authority, it's the poor who benefit. It's the poor he's spending his authority on. It's those who are on the outside that he spends his authority on. Jesus, in one of these parables, when they're confused by Jesus' teachings, he points to John, right? He talks about how the people of the day, the powers of the day, the religious leaders of the day, they couldn't see that John was under the authority of God. They couldn't see it. They were blind to it. Or maybe they didn't want to see it. But the people who saw it were the prostitutes or the poor, the hungry, the people who wouldn't typically be in any kind of authority of the day. They could see it. They could sense it. And for John, it meant that his head ended up on a plate. See, I think this idea around authority is challenging for us today, as many of us are people of privilege. We have authority from that privilege. We have platform to speak and to share and to use that authority either in this kingdom or in the kingdom of God. We need to decide which side or which kingdom we want to spend our authority on. And if you're spending your authority in ways that benefit you, that make you more wealthy, that help you climb the ladder at work, that make you feel more right about the opinions that you have, then I think the question has to be asked, by what authority are you doing these things? Is it your authority? Is it man-given authority? Is it authority in this natural world? Or is it supernatural authority that God has given you? See, Jesus, as a Jesus follower, we are given this authority. In the Great Commission, we're told that we have the authority. Jesus tells his disciples, I'm leaving you and I'm giving you my authority. So the question asks, what do we do with this authority? The question we've got to wrestle with is, how are we holding this authority? It's not so much whether or not we have it. It's how we hold it and what we do with it. Who's benefiting from the authority we have in our life? See, I'm becoming more and more convinced that the authority that we have, it's probably not best spent climbing the ladder at our job. It's probably not best spent getting in arguments on Facebook about which political party we side with and don't side with. Because I'm not sure that either of those spaces benefit the people on the outside, benefit the people that Jesus called us to. At the end of chapter 21, Jesus talks to some of the religious leaders who are challenging him after yet another confusing parable. And he says, have you read the scriptures? He says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. It was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given into people who are producing its fruit. So the people that are producing kingdom fruits. And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. When the chief priests and the Pharisees, the authorities of the day, heard his parables, they perceived he was speaking about them. And although they were seeking to arrest him, they feared the crowds because they held him to be a prophet. I think for Jesus, he was speaking about the priests and the Pharisees, that if they were to step into holding authority in the way that the kingdom calls those of us in authority to hold authority, then yeah, there's a good chance that we become rejected, that we become the stone that the builders reject. And in fact, I think when Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, when he's speaking to the chief priests, that I think they're wrong in the sense that he's not speaking about them, but he's speaking about himself. But as usual, when Jesus is speaking about himself, he speaks with his invitation to come and follow me and to be with me in this way. The way of Jesus calls us to hold authority in a way that lifts up people who don't have authority. He calls us to use our voice for people who don't have a voice. And often, sometime in our life, and this may not always be the case, and it might not be the case in the situation you're facing right now, but at some point in your life, if you're functioning in the kingdom, I think, and hear this is what I think. I think you're eventually faced with opportunities to stand up for those who don't have opportunities, that you're faced with the opportunity to use your authority to uplift those who desperately need to be uplifted, to uplift those that Jesus longs for and longs to see them no longer be under the hand of oppressive authority. And that might cause you to be pushed out. That might cause you to at one point maybe be the cornerstone in some other authority system, but then to be rejected by that authority system because you weren't willing to play into that authority system. But perhaps this is when we function in light of our cornerstone, Jesus, and the way of Jesus, and the way that he holds his authority. I'd encourage you as you're reading through Matthew to pay attention to who Jesus' authority benefits. What do we do with authority in the kingdom of God versus what we do with authority in the kingdom of man? And I would push that the answer lies in who does the playing out of your authority, when you exhibit your authority, when your authority is on display, when you're speaking from your authority. Ask the question, who benefits? Who benefits when I practice, when I walk in this authority? And I think then you can begin to ask, which kingdom am I functioning under? Which system of authority am I participating in? The system of authority in the kingdom of God, or the system of authority in the kingdoms of this world? I hope that gives you something to chat about today, something to chew on, and something to wrestle with in your own context. I'm in Portland. You are not. What this looks like for me is so different than what it looks like for you. But Jesus calls us to the same place, is to wrestle with how do we continue to participate in the kingdom of God in all factions of our life. Blessings and peace be with you.